Hello and welcome to our next segment reading of the Asatru Edda. I am Askr and today's chapter, which is entitled Folkwanderung, this story begins to account of the migration of the ancestors from the seat of civilization in the north, and they begin their expansion outwards from this area, and it was largely responsible due to the Fimbulvetr, which is still going on. We're on the back end of it now as far as the story goes. But the people, they not only quested out for more land to further their territories and their fame, but also to find more hospitable climes in order for them to live in, to grow. As we all know, that agriculture was very complicated in the northernmost regions of the world, especially here in Scandinavia, which is where we believe the seat of civilization rests. So, today's chapter, Folkwanderung. Midgarder had been ravaged by the terrible cold Volander produced. The distinctions between summer and winter disappeared altogether, and it seemed as if winter would reign every month of the year. The land closest to the southern shore of the Elivagar, where Egil's fortress stood, became covered with glaciers and sheets of ice, which the rays of the sun did not melt. The Alfar that lived there, who had been Volander's assistants and Egil and Thalfi's comrades, migrated, proceeding south towards the Sviar. The Jotnar then set out across the Elivagar in boats and settled on the abandoned meadows. There they had made their homes between the roofs of the glacier-covered mountains. Here, where Midgarder's herds had died of hunger, their black oxen and golden horned cattle grazed well, because, like at Humla, they licked substances from the Rhine frost and scratched up nourishing mosses from drifts that covered the valley paths. In Svithjod, whose southernmost tip is called Arvangaland, now dwelt many Attar descended from Askr and Embla, all speaking the same language and following the same customs. South of the Sviar and by the Jorlaverer, which stretches along Arvangaland's southern coast, lived the Gotar, Danir, Herudir, Gepedir, Vinidiri, also called Langbarthar, the Angrir, Tiringar, Valdarar, and other Attar. Until then, they had all lived in harmony, regarding themselves as what they were, branches of one and the same family tree. As long as they had spread out over the north, the land had been good, beautiful, and plentiful. But with the Fimbulvetr came need, first for the Sviar, who lived further north than others. Freyr and Freyja no longer promoted fruitfulness and fertility. The Svanmajar no longer provided the fields and meadows with Yggdrasil's fructifying honeydew. Herds decreased while bear and wolf packs grew, and worst of all, the wolves in need of food closed their jaws on the folk. There came poverty and want in through the windows. Hunger spread its wings and struck down upon the land. Strife leapt proudly over the street and onward into the houses. The Vergar, led by Sindri, came forth from Svarinshagar and conferred with the Jarlar of the Sviar. All of the Sviar took part in their deliberation and so resolved to leave the land of their forefathers and go south. If they could not win better fields through peaceful agreements, they would take them by the sword, and thus they often entered into battle. The Scandiar, who were desirous after the lands of their forebears, came to Danmark. Upon a bright night, they all came. Now they said that they had the right upon the land and fought over this. The Sviar pushed down against the Gotar, and they against the Danir, and they against the Hururir, and the other Attar. The push from the north to the south became greater every year, for every year the Fimbulvetr and the unmelting ice fields consumed a greater portion of the inhabited country. The Devergar and Sindri's band, who came forth from Svarenshagar, attacked and took Arvangaland as far as Yoruverar. Jotnar, including Fjalar and Frosty, also joined in the battle to aid Evaldi's sons in bringing ruin to Midgard. At this time, Jarl lived in Arvangaland, reigning as its Jarl and judge. He was the son of Heimdallr, who also a child came to the land bringing holy fire, beneficial runar, a sheaf of grain, as well as tools and weapons. Jarl had now grown old. After a long and commendable service, he had gained much experience. He recalled from his childhood and youth the happy times of the Gulader, free from vice, strife, crime, and need. His adult years had witnessed humanity's Sifralder and the moral decline of his people. In his later days, he experienced the onset of the Fimbulvetr and the beginning of the Alder, which reminded him of the prophecy spoken by ravens at his son's birth. When they saw the newborn Konar, they declared that the age of peace was over. Konar had held in such high esteem that he was thought to also be the son of the great Thor. When the sons of Ivaldi had ceased watching the Elivagar, many Jotnar had crossed over into the northernmost parts of Midgard and settled there. Thor went to drive off or slay these dangerous newcomers, and Konar accompanied his divine father on the trip. They had many excursions against the Jotnar who had taken the land in northern Midgard. Many Jotnar and warring Giger met their deaths, but as a whole, this mattered little since others took their place. As good as Thor's iron hammer was, with it he could not hinder the ever-advancing sheets of ice that covered the mountain plains. Even in the summertime, the valleys were covered in snow. And now the great Folkwanderung happened. After the Sviar had begun the push southward, Konar had something to do other than follow Thor on excursions against the Jotnar. The first wave of folk that flowed from the north had set another in motion, and the second a third, and so on, so that wave after wave surged against Arvangaland, the cradle of our people, where Jarl had lived for so long and had happily been the lawgiver and judge of the folk. Now, on the border of Arvangaland, mighty battles were fought in which Konar and Hamal performed many feats. But the old Jarl saw that the resistance was futile in the long as the powers of Fimbulvetr raged behind the more northerly Attar and compelled them to push onward. They had to do this or die of starvation. And since all these Attar were related and traced their pedigree from Avrungaland, Jarl did not want to see them destroyed one another in this brotherly feud. Thus, he decided to proceed south with his people as well. So it happened, and many Attar united under him to win land on the other side of the North Sea. Konar commanded all these Attar. These Yalar raised him on their shoulders and elected him king. Nothing was able to withstand them. Beneath them, south of the sea, they placed the extensive land where sailable rivers sought paths between deep, lush forests and rich pasture lands. They won and divided amongst themselves a kingdom which in the west had the mighty Rhine River as its border, and in the south a wooded highland, which lay in the shade of one of the highest mountains in Midgard, now called Mount Blanc. In the east, the realm stretched far into the undying tableland with many rivers that made their way down to the Black Sea. Thus was fulfilled the Norners' prophecy that Konar would have a kingdom extending in the east and west, as far in these directions as they had stretched the golden threads in the harp of his weave. But to the north they extended only a single thread, and if it did not hold, the cradle of the Teutonic people and the holy graves of their forefathers would forever remain in the power of the forces of Frost and the enemies of the Godin. Thank you very much for sitting in on today's segment of the Asatru Edda reading. I hope you enjoyed it. Please support the channel, hit that thumbs up button, and subscribe for all new content. Thank you again for listening in. We'll see you on the next segment.